celebrating August's birthdays today in the other room, and it's Lucky's birthday. Important event. I don't know, or have a date? Is that what you call it, dummy cake? I don't know. I don't know what we have. Anyhow, it's just informed the days. So acknowledgements and others who have birthdays in August as well. us less pleased. So delightful. To say, as you noticed, if you read the announcement, Milda is the last Sunday with us, and she's getting back to school and full of fascinating information about the events in Chicago. I'll talk to her briefly, would love to talk more. On your homeward journey, be mindful that we have lots of gawkers about. They're back. It's pre-camp, pre-class, and there's all kinds of new visitors with their parents and not necessarily knowing where they are. So be mindful, please. And I believe in another Sundays you will be back in the chapel. And by the time I'm back, hopefully we will be back in the chapel. So that will include this series that we've been doing in the summer in this room. Again, we welcome your comments. I terrify these days of the theology of like. I just like, or that doesn't give us much information, or I don't like. Well, that doesn't give us much information. So if you like, it will be helpful to know why. If you don't like, it will be helpful to know why. That would be for liturgy and learning. So it is an interesting aspect. We've been doing discussions. Some think it's just sharing mutual ignorance. Some might think it's sharing great wisdom. And on it goes, and such is life. But in an interesting way, in a yeshiva, in a historical rabbinical understanding, this is very much what it's like. The scripture is read, is given an initial introduction, an initial lecture, and then it's open for discussion. And sermo, the Latin from whence sermon comes, means a dialogue. So it's a dialogue of the preacher with the text and the wisdom of scholarship, but it's also within the community and in our Reformed community, an informed Reformed community. How's that? That's alliterative. So a bit more of that when we get into the text. It may seem a banal text, but it's a fascinating one, I assure you. May we worship God. McGill University is on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe and the Kanien'kehá:ka nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse indigenous peoples whose presence marks this territory on which peoples of the world now gather. You know this one? Praise my soul, the God of heaven. And just a comment, for a while anyhow, and there's good fresh air happening here, we are without masks. Scary, I know. But it means that maybe we can sing. So maybe part of the choir not at full volume, but it's a chance to sing hymns again. We'll see what happens with new variants. We do want to keep people safe, but if you can sing, let's sing. O God, I wish from now on to be the first to become conscious of all that the world loves, pursues, and suffers.
I want to be the first to seek, to sympathize and to suffer, the first to unfold and sacrifice myself.
To become more widely human and more nobly of the earth than any of the other world's serfs.
God, hear the silent opening of our hearts to those things that lie deep within us this day.
God, in your love,
Hear our prayer.
The psalm, and I'm seeing Esther can introduce it as well, but imagery. Anyone here been to Pompeii or Naples, that area of Italy? You have been there? While you were there, did you have what came from there? Pizza. It's more like a margarita, it's not with everything that we did. There was no smoked meat pizza there. But the tradition is olive oil. And so much olive oil that it runs down your arm. A blessing, and I just think it's an interesting image of the blessing that's seen here in the oil on Aaron's beard. And I heard a wonderful sermon from an African-American preacher at Princeton on that very line, the oil running down Aaron's beard, this frequent, fragrant, rather, blessed oil. So when you hear it, think of having a good slice of pizza with so much oil that's running down your arm, and what that feels like. Miren, bueno. Hear then this reading from Matthew. Jesus left that place and went to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Shoo her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. And her daughter was healed instantly. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
Write these words on our hearts, dear God.
Remembering George Johnson, this is the word of the Lord, and you better heed it. Would you bless our homes and, let's go up one. Spirit of the living God, 376. Fascinating passage this morning. And I'm going to ask you not to share like or dislike, but I want you to think theologically. When you phrase your statement saying, this is the theology that I see in the Testaments over and new, this is passage of the Bible that I feel we relate to this, be a bit more in line of where we need to be heading as a community of the faithful, of the priesthood of all believers. So make me silent meditation. Interesting to see how to reflect and to bounce off ideas, not even though they come from within ourselves and our values and our prejudices and everything else that makes us human. Interesting. Here's a map. I was just speaking, Bill, about being in Chicago, and I remember the first time I could never understand why they said the south side of Chicago, that famous song, The Jim Croce, because you thought it was on the bottom of the lake. Well, it's not. It's on the side of the lake, so there is north-south. Well, same with the side of the Mediterranean Sea and where Israel is. It's sort of a north-south direction. And if you can see, there's the Sea of Galilee, there's Nazareth, Cana, Capernaum, Bethsaida, Caesarea Philippi, and Jerusalem's down here. Now, this story takes place in the region, in the area of Tyre and Sidon, in Phoenicia. Now, I could not find exactly what would have been understood in Hellenistic times as the region of Tyre and Sidon. Today, it's Lebanon. So, what is Jesus doing there in the first place? Is it more towards Nazareth, or is it outside, across the border, out of the land? It adds a dynamic to the passage, because he's going along, he's done something. Matthew is always, then, Jesus was doing yada, 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 and then he was here. And while he was here, something interesting occurs. And we're just stitching together and figure out, well, what was so fascinating? What's interesting? And how do we hear this with the ears of the early church history after that, and if at all possible of the time of Jesus, to peel off the layers of the onion as best we can to get back to the core of the matter, the heart of the artichoke, if we want. So he's there, and this woman somehow recognizes authority, divinity, power within him, and asks him to exorcise a demon from her daughter. She's possessed. And you get this debate. The disciples say, lose her. That's the literal Greek translation. In street vernacular today, it would be "D the B." That would be very much its sense. Get rid of her. Woman, first off. Foreigner, second off. We're not supposed to have anything to do with them. Remember the story of the road from Jericho to Jerusalem, and the going one falls amongst thieves? And the ones that pass by, because Sabbath, can't break that. So, well and good. An interesting argument. You notice in our bulletin we say the Hebrew Scripture. That came from the 70 studies of Professor Stendhal at Harvard Divinity School. That started that, or Yale. And it was acknowledging that both testaments are valid, reconciliation with the community of Israel, with the Jewish community, an acknowledgement and his opinion that Jesus in his earthly ministry never did anything that broke kosher. Never. Which would include touching, dealing with outsiders, unclean, nothing. Interesting point of view. And we can debate, and it is debated. Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe this passage, maybe not this passage. But let's have that framework in mind. It's certainly being set up that way, isn't it? That the disciples are the one that says, have nothing to do with it. Now, early Christian community, we know the tension between Jewish members of the diaspora who decided that Jesus was Messiah and wished to worship Jesus, or we could acknowledge Jesus as the teacher that would lead them to righteousness. He was called the teacher of righteousness for the people on the way. Christos, we're not exactly sure when that term, the Greek term, the anointed one, starts to be really applied to Jesus. Fairly early on, but in there. So there's a debate in the early church, and Matthew's roughly thought to be Asia Minor, that this is still in-house. It's for the 12 tribes. It's not for the Gentiles. And that whole struggle between, do the Gentiles belong? Do the Gentiles not belong? Eventually, it becomes that the Gentiles are the ones that belong, and the others are not welcome. And the term dogs and other terms were used by Christians to talk about Jews, and that's documented in the Church Fathers. So, an interesting movement and tension and walking the frontier. I love the French word for border. We say border, and it sounds more like edge. Frontier has more that sense of one world to another, one place to another. And so the question here is, Jesus decided to have a compassionate moment? Perhaps. Many scholars say, no, that's not what this is about. It's about persistence and the rabbinical argument. Do this, a wisdom statement, a rhetorical statement with wit. I mean, it never hurts to have a bit of wit, to be able to laugh and engage. It's a Mediterranean habit. You ever been shopping, done shopping in the marketplace? Well, much of the world really. And maybe it was more here at one time than it is currently. Like you expect me to pay that for that? It was fascinating a chance when I was in Jamaica with a Jamaican couple. We went to the marketplace in Montego Bay, and seeing white people always escalate the price. No, you're not paying that for that, and then arguing back and forth and engaging. Well, when did you catch the fish? Well, how fresh is it? And on it goes. So that whole understanding of life is in this passage, and in that understanding of how one relates to God. We see in so many places in the Older Testament where God says, "No way, Jose," going for last Sunday. And Jose says, "Well," and presents an argument. And God says, "Well," and then, "Well," and then God says, "Well, okay. Just this once." "Well, only this once?" "Well, maybe twice." "Only twice?" And on it goes. So we have to think that way. And we're talking about a Canaanite woman who appears in a number of times in Matthew. Not necessarily the same one, but the Canaanite woman. First off, woman, and second, Canaanite. Well, what's so hot about Canaanite? Who were the Canaanites? No one here knows who the Canaanites were? Oh, shame. Shame. God gave the Holy Land to the people of Israel, right? Who did he give it from? Canaanites. The land of Canaan. Oh! We're talking about an indigenous person here. Oh! Maybe not a dynamic that was thought of in that time, but it's kind of interesting now, isn't it? And persistence, and so Jesus does not touch her, does not eat with her, at a distance engages with her. You could say still keeps kosher, but the request is honored because of faith. Because of faith, the outsider is seen as having something. So, good people. Oh, Canada, our home on native land. How are you with that? Theologically, looking at this passage. Agree with this? This is a petition wanting your support. In a former time, the person who sung such, because it was not authorized, would have been given a public display. As I said, the windows on the manse of the Presbyterian Church in Quebec City has no windows on one side because it faced the jail yard where there are public hangings. It used to be a spectator sport. Now it's, oh yes, wisdom there, not wisdom there, danger there, not danger there, theologically. Quebec is saying un peuple, une nation, and we need to protect the French language in North America. And so we're dealing with legislation and intent to maintain that, having gained and changed, even subtle changes, which revenge. Rue de la Montagne should really be Rue Mountain, because it's named after an Anglican bishop. But little change, little dig as to what was and what is. We're dealing globally. Sweden is in trouble now because of a reaction against mass immigration. Now, we have a mixed and blended community here, from a large Filipino community and those who have been here, a few Caribbean, although they haven't been out as late. And yet I know in the Philippines, because it's interesting, I've learned this through connections, that the Filipinos who see themselves as Filipino don't like the Chinese. And it's caused problems for Chinese Filipinos, or those who look more Chinese. Am I correct in that? I've heard of just, there was an aside. And on the First Nations on the West Coast, the dark person, the dark man, is a negative figure in their theology and spirituality. And so there's sort of an innate prejudice against blacks within the First Nations on the West Coast. This xenophobia, in, out, like, dislike, is human. It's part of us. And so we get to this topic about, well, what is it? What are the political ramifications if we say our home on native land? If we start to sing that and that becomes the way of the land, is that then something that says, okay, well, we're tired of you being here, goodbye. And so we go back, some of us, to England, but then we're Anglo-Saxon, so maybe we're actually France, and then France says yes, but no. They don't want to recognize again the King of France, who was the King of France when Henry was King of France and Britain, and on it goes. So human migration, movement, nature, in, out, and where's our faith in all of this? Does it have anything to say? Is it not my problem? Like the disciples saying, yeah, ignore it. Or is this something that, being the ones who wrestle with God, an issue we have to wrestle with? Over to you. And you thought it was a boring passage from the Bible.
As you mentioned, the national anthem over the news, back and forth, this and that. It's been politicized, first of all. Secondly, I don't think everybody had noticed that when she sang the national anthem until probably one started the change of the word and between and out. Now, they get to that point now. The legislation, I think, the bottom line is you spend money to debate about a particular word. And we tend to focus so much on that. In the meantime, we have other problems. Being a nation, being a province, being a city, and spend money and whatever you spend there, your time, your energy, whatever. We forget the priorities of each individual. That really kind of starting to get bothered about it. Why do we have to spend so much time debating with one word? That other people have nothing to eat. The inflation is crazy. Poverty is one of our priorities. And we're considered in North America as being rich. We have all the resources, but not everybody is benefiting. The less fortunate, as you call them. So, where is your understanding of the whole picture?
Question. Where's your faith? How many of you turn to the Bible in decision making still? At one time it would have been very common. It's an interesting faith question. Oh, is it not my problem what goes on in that book from so long ago, or does it have some information about who we are and on issues of our day? Oh, it's fun to make people uncomfortable. I heard some comments in the chorus around. Anyone want to speak up?
I was taught in the history, what's the problem during Christ's times? It's language is between what? The Greeks and the Arabic. They had no problem with this.
Latin is
Yeah.
Franca.
They had no problems. That's why the parable came in. That they would think because of these two languages. In Plato, it doesn't understand what's happening. And I was also told that God was hanged because they said he's a Messiah, fake Messiah, because there's hundreds and hundreds of Messiahs being killed. But they thought it was one of them too. It's a language.
Language. And language is critical when you're dealing with translation, no question. A part of my function is to bring the language differences. So at least you hear, we try to hear it as best we can in our language. Jill?
I guess I don't have a problem with that. I think we're all working on truth and we should be working on truth and reconciliation. I don't know how to argue it from a theological point of view. But it's clear in my mind that we're settlers and indigenous people were here before we were.
So were the Israelites.
Okay, so.
See?
Well, that's a whole other issue.
God gave the people of Israel the land. Didn't matter that.
I won't go there, but I agree that I'm okay with a word change like that in the national anthem. And unlike some people, I don't think I fear the possible consequences or like we've given up, you know, we're on unceded territory and okay, we agree to that, and is that, you know, what are the implications of that? So I don't think, I would go on faith and say if we can make that change and
Okay.
live with it.
See, this is to me a point of this passage is the Canaanite, you know, the First Nations of the land, and it's still an issue with the Palestine. That how can Europe and the world feeling guilty for what happened, say the nation of the state of Israel? I mean, we haven't solved that one yet, and that because of biblical issues. But what happens here? So there's you know, we could say very well in this. Well, look at the British Israelite Society, where you know Britain, the empire was the New Jerusalem, and so God gave us this land. Clearly, we've done something with it. That was the old argument about Palestine. How far have we come in millennia? Other comments?
In the Old Testament, never allowed people to have land, to own land, so that the land is only the land is
Did you hear what he said? Excuse me, say that again, but a little louder, please.
God, in the Old Testament, God did not allow Israelites to own their own land. Land is basically belongs to God, not the people of Israel. So I think the Israelites feeling that the land is ours is not what God ordered or God said.
The First Nations had a similar, of this area, had a similar point of view. And that's why the wampum with the two rivers running beside each other. See, there's it. Well done, thou good and faithful steward. Entering into what year now?
Can't wait for next week.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how that theologically changes the discussion somewhat? And this is the kind of, I think, for me, wonderful creative things about biblical studies. Because it says, you know, you can say, well, I believe in God, and then the question is, well, which God? And how do you know God? Well, God told me, well, is that inspiration, epiphany moments, or is that psychosis? It's fascinating when we start to explore these things.
So based on what he said, how did it come to a point that the Israel took kind of a sense of ownership of the land? It's originally, it's not there, it's God's land. So when did it become to give them the entitlement of ownership?
Nation, in the sense of
Because
land.
that's the conflict between them and the other country, until now.
I mean, see, that's a question to further explore. I mean, partly, I would say Hellenistic mindset would have more boundaries. That seems more Greek in thought. But I can't say that for certain. The kingdom of David and the monarchy period, the monarchy in Israel, constant. Once you establish a monarchy has a realm. And see, chief was different. Chief, different understanding. They were the representative of, certainly, again, I know more some of the West Coast, where the longhouse there, having been in, and in community, and the chief was the spokesperson for a community, who the community invests the voice and authority, and control of external resources, and also discussions about relations with other nations. That was part of that. There were wars. There were, as we know, First Nations, even in this area, did take slaves, did take prisoners. So the territories were debated, whose traditional territories. Hence, in this area, the Iroquois, the Mohawk part, the great peacemaker, and that's an interesting story. So my sense is primarily Hellenism, Alexander. So when he changes the map of that world at that time. Other scholarship here. Yes, who's Jill?
Okay. Thank you for this time. Your comment about who's God reminds me of what I just heard about that candidate for president who's a Hindu. And those right-wing Christians who say, how could we have that fellow in the White House with all his gods? Oh boy. Oof.
Yeah, it's So, any others who haven't thought, you've been listening, I hope with some degree of interest. See, it's a little more challenging when it's just, well, the man or well, it used to be more the man, the person on the box says, and we listen and say, yeah, that's nice. I always like, after a service we say a nice sermon or nice, and you say, well, what was nice about it? We've been engaging in more of that dialogue this summer. So, and that's what I always like to do, is to try to engage that thought. I mean, the best sermons would be the one, really the best ones would be the ones you say, why on earth did he say that? Rah, 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 rah. And you're working on it all week long. Might not make it as comfortable for me in the long run, but it maybe is doing its work because it's staying with you and you're working it through and you're having to reflect on that. Hopefully in community. Hopefully in community. Any other comments, thoughts, reflections? Last word. You see, something that seems simple isn't necessarily quite so simple. Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Would you bless our homes and families and land? Amen.